Hey everyone, welcome to the investor.bet NRL Round 11 betting trends preview. Here we're going to look at all 8 games coming up this weekend, specifically from a betting perspective. We're going to look at the previous history between each matchup, who's been winning, who's been covering the spread, what the odds have been, what the total lines have been, have they been going over or under. I'm also going to go through some of the stats of how these teams have been performing, and just go through my early thoughts of how I'm looking at approaching betting on these games to give you information that will allow you to make the best possible betting decisions this weekend. All the tools I use to analyze games in terms of the stats and the breakdowns of try scores and all that is included in the NRL Bet Finders, plus all my plays in the Best Bets membership, which you can access through the description. There are some interesting games coming up this weekend, that's for sure, and quite a lot of even games. There's a number of them where the odds have these games very even, and I'm going to go through and break down why I think one side is better positioned than the other, which you'll see soon through the video. The Friday night game, we've got 2 games on Friday night, 3 on Saturday, 3 on Sunday this weekend, so no Thursday night game. That also means the try scorer video we posted on Friday this week, where I'll go through all the players I have shortlisted as try scorers. So make sure you have notifications on so you can get that video as soon as it's posted. But that'll be posted Friday before the kickoff on the Friday night game, so it'll give you time to put those bets on if you're following along. But before we get into the matchups for this week, I wanted to just do a quick review. I wasn't able to post a full breakdown of all the games from last week, but I wanted to just give you the information from the betting and what happened last weekend. And it was a very, very close round and a round of comebacks. So 5 games were decided by 4 points or less. So super round of tight games and especially games of comeback. So the first game, Eels versus Dolphins. Dolphins running out 20 points to 16 winners. Parramatta were well positioned to win that game midway through the second half, but the Dolphins ran in 2 quick tries, snatched lead back, and eventually win by 4 points. Then the Knights led the Dolphins 20-6 at halftime and so leading 20-0 at one stage. The Titans ran in 4 straight tries to run out 4-point winners. Broncos were leading the Rabbitohs 14-0 at halftime. The Rabbitohs outscored them 22-0 in the second half to win 22-14. The Raiders were leading the Bulldogs 20-0 at halftime, and I remember seeing this game as on TV when I was walking past like restaurants and stuff, and with Raiders leading at halftime by that margin, it was very interesting. But the Bulldogs coming back, scoring 6 tries to none in the second half, led by Stephen Crichton, 32-0 second half scoreline. Got the win there down in Canberra. Warriors in the game against the Dragons were leading 15-14. They're leading 14-4 at halftime. Dragons came back, leveled the score. Then Luke Metcalf kicked the game-winning field goal with just over 10 minutes to play. Cowboys-Panthers ended in a draw 30-all. Panthers were leading 18-12 at halftime. They also scored the first 2 tries of the second half to lead 30-12, but then the Cowboys leveled it up just after halftime, but then the Panthers scored the next 2 tries. The Cowboys came back in the last 10 minutes to score 2 converted tries off their own through Robert Derby and Tom Dearden, and then no team was really able to get much of a shot at it in Golden Point. And then on Sunday, the Storm 64-0 winners over the West Tigers, 34-0 at halftime, 11 tries to 0. So some crazy stats in that game. And then final game of the round, Sharks won 30-14 over the Seagulls. Cronulla led 14-0 at halftime. The Seagulls got the first 2 tries of the second half, plus then a penalty goal in the 61st minute to level the score. And then Sharks scored 3 late tries in that final 15 minutes to push the margin out to 16 points and be one of the few sides this weekend to retain a halftime lead and go on and win that game. But looked a little bit dicey when the Seagulls came back and tied the game. I ended up going to that game and wanted the Sharks to win, obviously, and they got off to a good start, but Manly came back with the crowd behind them. The Sharks responded when under pressure, and Sharks kept another side to a low score again this season. Of these games on the weekend, 5 went under, 3 went over the total. Home teams only won 2 games. They were the Rabbitohs who beat the Broncos and the Storm beating the Tigers. Home teams covered the spread in 4 of 8 games, so half and half there to home teams and away teams in terms of covering. Underdogs won 5 games outright, so it was a huge game, a huge week for underdogs. Plus, Then you also add in the Cowboys drawing against the Panthers. That means only 2 favorites won. Those favorites who won were the Warriors by 1 point against the Dragons, and then the Storm beating the Tigers as the biggest favorite of the round. So definitely not a good weekend for backing favorites, that's for sure. Underdogs cover the spread in 7 of the 8 games. Storm were the only favorite to actually cover the spread. So a big week, not only for underdogs winning outright, but also for them covering the spread. Going forward, round number 11. First game on the Friday night, Newcastle at home again this week against the Parramatta Eels. Newcastle really blew that game last week against the Titans, and Adam O'Brien definitely wasn't happy about it. Knights have now lost 6 of their last 7 games overall this season after winning their first 2. So definitely struggling. Eels are averaging more points per game. They also come into it with a bad record overall in the season. They have lost both games since their bye in round 8, but they were against the Sharks and Dolphins, and they did keep those games somewhat close, and they'll also be a little bit disappointed they didn't get over the line. And that game, Eels-Dolphins last week, was a game Parramatta probably should have won. They had a lot of opportunities and blew a lot of genuine scoring chances. And there's not much between these two sides. Like, in terms of attack, Eels are slightly better. Defensively, Knights are the better side, quite considerably. Newcastle, small favourites here, $1.77 minus 1.5. Eels have won and covered 6 of the past 7 versus Newcastle, and they've also won and covered 3 of the past 4 versus Newcastle in Newcastle. Last time they met was round 17 at this venue, and that's the one game that Newcastle have gotten over the Eels in the past 7, and the Knights won that game 34-26 as 1.5 point favourites. On the back of their defence, I can see in Newcastle why they are favourites for this game, but wouldn't be surprised at all if Parramatta were to jag the win in this one. There's not much between these two teams at all, and likely just comes down to the team that turns up better on the night. Like, I think with Newcastle, the body language of the teams, Keelan, is really not looking great, and whether they have that much, firstly, motivation, but in also confidence, I guess you could add to that in how they're playing. They're making a lot of errors. If the Eels can capitalize on that, they'll give themselves a good chance of winning this game. The Knights make the most errors of any side. The total is 45.5 for this game. The last 4 between these two sides have gone over. This season, Parramatta, 6 of the last 8 games have gone under, and the Knights are a huge underside with all bar 1 game against the Sharks going under the total. So you can either trust the form this season and lean towards the under 45.5, or go off the history between the two sides, which has seen us have high scoring games. This total is 3 points lower than what it was when these sides met in round 17 last year. For me personally, I'd lean towards the trends of this year and lean towards this game being a slightly lower scoring. Both teams trying to win games on the back of their defense. Newcastle have shown glimpses of scoring points a bit more in the past couple of weeks, scoring 20 and 30 points and still keeping their defense somewhat in check. And Parramatta have defensively improved, but also have struggled to score in majority of games. And I can't see them scoring much over 24 points in this game. So it'll make it difficult for this game to go over if Parramatta do defend somewhat well, which is a big question considering they concede the most points of any side. But as I said, it has improved recently. They've only given up over 28 points once since round number 2, which they had that game 56 against the Storm and 32 against the Tigers. But since then, there's only been that one real major blowout where they gave up 50 against Canberra. So defensively, the numbers progressively coming down. Next game on Friday night, Bulldogs versus Roosters. Bulldogs off the win against Canberra, and then Roosters coming off the bye. Bulldogs favourites though, $1.44 minus 7.5. Statistically, Bulldogs are a long way in front of the Roosters here, particularly in defence, where Bulldogs are your number 1 side. Roosters are your number 15 side. Bulldogs, though, have been conceding more points recently, and that's also made their last 3 games go over the total. The past 3 weeks for the Bulldogs, they've conceded 26.6 on average, with 42 against the Broncos, 18 against the Titans, and 20 against the Raiders. The reason I bring that up, it's not a huge amount, but it's well above the average of what they were doing prior to those last 3 games. Bulldogs very good at covering the spread this season. They've only failed to cover twice overall in the year against Parramatta and against the Broncos. Now for the Sydney Roosters, as I said, they're off the bye. They won 3 of their 4 games prior to the bye, just dropping the game against Penrith, and their last 3 games have gone over. So with the total at 44.5, 3 of the past 5 have gone under, but 2 of the past 3 have gone over. Be leaning towards the over. I think we may see some points in this game. I have this number at 46.5, so I think it's a touch under what it should be. And then in terms of a side, Roosters have a very good record against the Bulldogs. They've won 10 of the past 12 meetings, but the teams have split the past 4 with the home side or listed home team winning the past 4 meetings. Last season they met twice. The Roosters won 26-8 at home, and the Bulldogs won their home game 30-26. For this game, I like Bulldogs definitely deserving to be favourites. Roosters will come out strong off the bye. The only way the Bulldogs get beat here, in my opinion, is if they have a little bit of a letdown game. Is if the Bulldogs have a letdown after that come from behind win against the Raiders. But they could also just take that momentum and keep on running with it just as easily. And the Bulldogs scoring, whilst they're winning games early on in the season on the back of their defense, their scoring's picked up dramatically. They've scored 32 or more in 3 of their past 4 games. The only game they did it was when they were overrun early by the Broncos, which is a little bit concerning. That's now been twice they've been dominated in the first half in 2 of the past 3 weeks. So they need to sort that area out a little bit. But I think they'll be able to find enough points to win this game against this Roosters defense, which is conceding 27 points a game overall this season, but has been better in recent times. But I think the Bulldogs will find enough points to win this game, but I can see it being a close matchup. Dolphins versus Warriors. Warriors small favourites here, $1.82 minus 1.5. The total is 48.5. Warriors, firstly, as favourites here, I just want to point out how this will now be their 3rd consecutive game on the road. They went to America early on in the season, then had a few home games, had the bye, then followed by a couple more home games against the Broncos and Knights, then played the Cowboys in Brisbane, Dragons in Sydney, and now back up to Brisbane again to play the Dolphins. They're at home next week following this against Canberra. Warriors have won their last 4 leading into this, have also won 7 of their last 8. So if they were to drop a match, you couldn't blame them a little bit. Did struggle to score last week, were held just to the 1 point in the second half against the Dragons in the game last week. They didn't cover the spread and that game went under. 3 of their last 4 have also gone under. Defensively, they're playing well. They'll need to do that to limit this Dolphins attack, which wasn't great last week against the Eels and just did enough for them to get over the line and win the game. Dolphins have a big game following this against the Bulldogs on the road before their bye. Dolphins are a bit hit and miss. Like, this is the key thing with Redcliffe. They can play very good or play very mediocre. I think the one thing though is they've been leaking points lately, conceding at least 16 in each of their past 4, but 3 of those 4 games, there's a 40 in there, a 38 in there against the Raiders and Roosters. So Warriors could definitely find some more points in this game, which will go a long way towards them winning. But I think my most likely thought on this game, or my strongest thought, is that it's going to be a close matchup. We look through the last 2 meetings from last year. Dolphins won by 2 points and the Warriors won by 4 points. I think we'll see a close game. At home, definitely give the Dolphins a shot at winning. I just don't think they have all the pieces right now to get over the Warriors if the Warriors turn up. But if the Warriors have a bit of a letdown of 3 consecutive road games, they do get James Fisher-Harris back, but it's not an ideal situation for New Zealand here. So I'd prefer backing it to be a close game than really taking either side to win from a confidence perspective. The total is 48.5, so they are expecting points in this game. 3 of the past 4 meetings, though, have gone under. This total is 3 points lower than their last meeting at this venue last season. And I still think it's a little bit higher than it should be. Both teams have had more games go under than over on the season. And with a number close to 50, you'd have to lean towards going under that number. Then we have the Cowboys versus Seagulls, 2 teams who, particularly Cowboys, definitely playing a lot better and are at home here for the 2nd straight week before their bye. Definitely deserving to be favourites. $1.72 minus 2.5. The total is 50.5 for this game. Now, Cowboys come into this winning 4 of their past 6. They also have a draw in there against the Panthers and a close loss against the Warriors. They have covered the spread, though, in 6 of their last 7 games, and their past 3 have gone over. Playing well enough to win this game against Manly at home. The Seagulls aren't playing well at all at the moment. They've lost 4 of their past 5. The only win against the Panthers 26-10 before the bye, but failed to cover the spread in 5 of their past 6. And also their past 4 games have gone under the total. And they've only scored over 18 points once in their past 4 games, which was that win against the Panthers. So if the Cowboys can show up defensively, which overall in the season hasn't been a strong point for them, they do tend to leak points. That'll be the key area for them winning this game. They just can't concede 26, 30 points to Manly and still expect to win. But I like them at home here to get over the line. The Seagulls aren't clicking at the moment. Tom Trbojevic isn't really playing that well. The Sharks did a very good job last week at shutting him down and for the most part taking him out of the game, with the kicking game not giving him room to make big returns and weave through and expect the Cowboys to implement simpler tactics. The Seagulls do have a good record though. Like, this is the argument for Manly. They've won 6 of the past 8 versus the Cowboys and covered the spread in 7 of the past 8. And the away team has won 8 of the past 10. So home field advantage hasn't really counted for much in this matchup. They have already met once this season, which was in Sydney, and the Seagulls won 42-12. Manly also won the game up in Townsville last year, 21-20. So with that recent record, you definitely have to give the Seagulls a chance, but I'd expect the Cowboys to win the game with the form of the current 2 sides. But for a lot of this season, that hasn't mattered too much. You can't put too much weight behind recent form because teams are dramatically changing week to week. But if I was for a tip in terms of who I think wins the game, I'd be leaning towards the Cowboys. The total is 50.5. 4 of the past 6 head-to-head have gone over. I think this total is pretty much spot on. Manly have a trend towards the under, and for the Cowboys, they have a trend towards the over. So they cancel each other out. Statistically, I have this number at 49.5, so very close to what the current total is. Sharks versus Storm. This is probably the best game of the round, especially off the Storm's win last week. The Storm haven't been super consistent, but they're $1.56 favorites on the road here, -3.5, and the total is 45.5. Last season, they met twice, and the Sharks won in Melbourne in the first meeting 25-18, and then the Storm eliminated them in the finals 37-10. So that'll definitely be in the back of the mind of the Sharks players, that the season was ended last year at the hands of the Storm, and they'll try and get a bit of revenge at home off of that. Storm, deserving favourites, you can't take that away from them at all, off particularly their performance last week. But they do face the number 2 defensive side here in the Sharks, who are keeping opponents to 18 points a game and concede the least points of any team in the first halves this year, which the Storm have made a habit of putting teams away early. They're averaging almost 22 points in first halves, and that's where they do the majority of their damage. Storm have won 7 of the past 9 versus the Sharks, but the teams have split the past 4 meetings, and the Sharks have covered 4 of the past 5 at home versus Storm. I think currently the line's a little bit too low to be backing the Sharks. If it got over the 6.5 mark, I'd definitely be interested in that handicap. But at the 3.5, I think it's a touch low. Sharks have won 4 of the past 5, just dropping the game against the Tigers in Golden Point a few weeks ago. Following this, they have the Roosters and then their bye. So if they can grab at least one of those next 2 games, they will be pretty well positioned going into that. Sharks, their last 3 have gone under the total, and 8 of their last 9 games have gone under the total. For the Melbourne Storm, they've been a bit hit and miss. They've had really good games and blowouts, and then some kind of disappointing losses against the Raiders, Dolphins, and also Dragons throughout that period. This game really hinges on how the first half goes. So the Storm haven't trailed at halftime in any game this season. They just were tied with the Rabbitohs in one game, 10-all at halftime. And for the Sharks, in terms of first halves this year, they've led in 4 of the past 5 at halftime. They need to be with the Storm at the break in order to give themselves a shot at winning this game. If they are down by 12, down by 18 points at halftime, then they'll be well and truly out of it. So this will hinge, and they need to turn it into be very strong defensively in that first half. Both teams come in on equal rest, having played on the Sunday last week. There's no rest advantage for either side. Sharks are back at home though, so they don't have to travel at least. For this game, I think we could see a close game. I don't think Storm are going to put a 30-point margin on the Sharks or anything like that. That Storm putting those big wins in games after losses, where this game isn't after a loss, and I think the Sharks can keep it somewhat close. So we can get a better number on the Sharks and take the plus. Otherwise, potentially Storm 1-12 or either side 1-12 if you're thinking the Sharks have a chance of winning here. Defensively, Sharks are the slightly better side. In attack, Storm obviously better after running in big numbers in multiple games. But Sharks win the games off the back of their defense, which is what will be key for them in this game. Broncos versus Dragons. The total is 45.5. 4 of the past 5 head-to-head have gone over. Sharks have a really strong record to the under this year. Storm more so an over side. I think this number is pretty accurate. Like statistically, I'm getting a higher number than what this total is, but Storm have a much tougher defensive matchup here than a few of the sides where they've run in big scores against. So this number is slightly inflated due to that. I'd have a slight lean towards the over, but with minimal confidence. I think if it goes over, it's not going to go over by a great deal. Then we have Broncos versus Dragons, the first game on Sunday. Broncos $1.31 favorites, minus 10.5 for a side that's lost 4 of their past 5 games and only scored over 18 points on one occasion. They're only averaging 19.6 points in their past 5. Against the Dragons side, who defensively haven't been great overall, but get a good chance of beating the Broncos here and have a very good record, winning 7 off the past 9 versus Brisbane. The teams have split the past 4 meetings and Brisbane have won 2 of the past 3 at home. But Dragons have a great record in this matchup, and I wouldn't be surprised to see them keep this game definitely close here against a Broncos side that's struggling at the moment. They lose Ben Hunt, Ezra Mam comes in. Dragons sorted out their defensive issues last week against the Warriors. They need to do that. They need to defend like that again this week against Brisbane up at Suncorp. If they can do that, they're a really good shot at winning this game, and I think the odds for this game is well and truly inflated in Brisbane's favour and should be a lot closer. So like the Dragons as an underdog here. They met here last season. The Dragons won 30-26 as 7.5 point underdogs, around the $2.70 mark in this game. They're even longer this time around. Even though they've lost their last 3, the performance last week was a lot better, and I think if they can expand on that in this game, they can keep it definitely close. The games that they have lost this year, there's been 6 of them. They've only lost 1 game by more than 8 points. They lost by 8 against the Bulldogs, 1 against the Rabbitohs, 1 against Parramatta, 6 against the Tigers, and 1 against the Warriors. And then against the Roosters was just the only game where they lost 46-18. And that was a game where the Roosters ran in late tries and really ran up the scoreboard on them. Broncos are capable of doing something similar when they're really on, but we haven't seen that much from the Broncos in recent times. So, I like the Dragons to keep this close. 8 of the past 9 head-to-head have gone over, and with that, bookmakers have just gone bang, 50.5 point total. Last time these sides met, it was a 50.5 point number as well. So they've kept it the same, and it did go over that. But the way these teams are playing, you'd lean towards the under on that number, especially considering the Dragons need to win this game on the back of their defense, keep Broncos in check like teams have been able to do recently. So me personally, I prefer the under. Raiders versus Titans. Raiders $1.33, minus 10.5. They lost their 5-game winning streak with that loss against the Bulldogs last week after being up 20-0 at halftime. And the total is 49.5 for this game. Gold Coast coming to this matchup off a win against the Knights, coming from well and truly down in that game. They were 20 points down and came back to win. Raiders were 20 points up and lost to teams off exact opposite situations. These teams met just in round 7, so very recently, and the Raiders won 30-20 on the Gold Coast. At home, you'd expect them to win, so agree with them being fairly heavy favourites here. The game last week where the Titans came back to win was more to do with the Knights just constantly making errors and giving Gold Coast really good field position, and just they absolutely fell apart. Canberra aren't going to do that. They'll be Ricky Stewart definitely would have been into them off their second half performance last week. I expect Canberra to come out strong. That game where Titans lost 20-30 against Canberra a few weeks ago, Gold Coast got a really good start in that game. They led 16-0, and Canberra scored 30 of the next 34 points. And don't think Canberra's going to let Gold Coast get off to a similar start in this game. Canberra have won 10 of the past 11 versus Gold Coast. Expect they'll win this game at home here. The total, 49.5. 6 of the past 10 head-to-head have gone under. It's not like that strong of a trend. The current number is exactly what I expected for this game. So personally, I don't have really any lean on the total, but I really expect Canberra to be winning this game. Also, for the Titans, it's back-to-back road games for them after playing in Newcastle last week. So not really an ideal situation, especially with Canberra getting back-to-back home games and against a much easier opponent than last week where they played the Bulldogs. And final game of the round, Tigers versus Rabbitohs. Bookmakers can't split them, $1.91 apiece, and the total is 45.5. Statistically, Tigers are the better attacking side, averaging just over 21 points a game. Rabbitohs averaging just under 16 points. So their attack's really been an issue. For the West Tigers, they come into this winning 3 of their past 5 games, but did lose 64-0 last week against the Storm. Mentally, they need to respond to that, which they get the chance to do against an opponent that they did beat in round 24 last season, 18-16, but the Rabbitohs have won 4 of the past 5 versus the Tigers. But in the Tigers' favour, the home team has covered 13 of the past 14, and right now, if they were to cover the spread, they'd also win this game. So, if you lean into that trend between these two sides, then you'd be more so going towards the Tigers. For this game, I really don't think there's much between these two sides, and I think it's going to be a close game. The Rabbitohs came from behind to beat the Broncos last week, 22-14, but prior to that, hadn't scored over 20 points in any of their 5 games prior to that matchup. So scoring's just been a major issue for South Sydney, and they rely heavily on Latrell Mitchell, who probably will have a big game here with Origin selection following this. So you definitely can't count them out. I think it'll be a close game, one that definitely could come down to the wire either way. So be looking at either side, 1 to 10, 1 to 12, try best here. Statistically, slight lean towards the Tigers, but hard to back with much confidence after last week. But you'd expect them to respond after such a demoralizing defeat. They have a lot more experienced players in this team now, and that'll help them going forward as compared to what we've seen in previous years. On the total at 45.5, lean towards the under. 3 of the past 4 head-to-head have gone under. Rabbitohs, every game this season has gone under the total. For the Tigers, they've more so been an overside. 3 of their last 4 games have gone over the total, but that's been due to opponents scoring, which we shouldn't really see from the Rabbitohs this week. So lean towards the under. I think it's 2 to 3 points higher than what the total should be for the final game of the round, which will be played at night as well on Sunday night. That is my early look at round number 11 in the NRL. For all my final bets, once I've had more looks through these games and broken it down a little bit more, all those plays are posted in the NRL Best Bets membership, which you can access through the link in the description. And you can use all the NRL Bet Finder tools to research games, research try scorers. Everything you need to make the best possible betting decisions on the NRL is included in there. Definitely try it out if you want to make money betting on the NRL. The try score video will be posted on Friday in time for the games on Friday night. So make sure you're subscribed, you have notifications on so you don't miss when that video is posted. I'm excited to break down the most likely try scorers for you in the games this weekend. Good luck. I'll see you in the try score video. Appreciate you guys watching and following along on the channel.